Good. Thank
Dr.
you.
Can I start?
Yes, yes, shoot, as the Americans say.
Dr. Alfredo, you know, I certainly call you the doctor of leadership.
Well, that's
First
kind
of
of you.
all, let me go to your childhood.
Yes. Oh,
You were born in
yes.
Uruguay, turned into
Yes.
Brazilian, a
Yes.
child of a broken family with
Yes.
blue collar overtunes,
Yes.
but inserted into an upper class education. Can you
Yes.
please share with us the story of your childhood as well as yourself as a student?
Oh, well,
All yours.
it's a long life, but I'll just be short about it, GK. In the last segment of this series of you, this beautiful series of you, Asha Bandarkar brought up the issue of family and how family shapes your future by inserting you in education, say. And it's true. I agree with it. It just depends on which family you're born into. And some people are luckier than others. I was lucky in a way that, I was brought up into a family that cared for me, and I was happy, relatively happy during some time. But then my parents broke off, and in an acrimonious way, and I was caught in the middle of that fight since rather early on. On my father's side, he was not wealthy, but he prized education, and he stuck me into an English school in Montevideo, Uruguay. He was an Anglophile, and he had gone to the same school, him and his brother. And it was a good school, I must admit. My mother, on the other hand, came from middle class, or perhaps even lower middle class family, where my uncle was worked in the port of Montevideo, the harbor, and so I was influenced by these two different areas of the world. Then upper class school in Uruguay, where I was expected to speak in English, when I couldn't really master, and at home I had a completely different lifestyle and even values and a cohort. But family, yes, shapes you. For example, when I was very small, perhaps 10 years old, I was visiting my paternal grandmother, and some were prominent in her living room. She had a diploma earned by my uncle as a PhD at the University of Cambridge. And she spoke about that with some reverence. I didn't even have a clue of what Cambridge meant. I was 10 years old and I was completely away from it all. But I realized that she prized that and that she cherished it. And I said, hey, one day I'll get one of those. And it's strange because that gives you some sort of direction in your life. But as you pointed out, yes, a broken family tends to make you an angry child. And angry childs initially are difficult to handle. Usually they try to tame down, right? Behave, and they are instilled into obedience and discipline, which just makes matters worse, really. And, a first leadership experience in my life, I was a gang leader.
Is it?
Terrible thing, yes. I mean, nothing serious, but nothing that would have put me behind the bars, But I wasn't a force for construction in life. No, I was rather destructive, and even at school. And I got suspended once at school, and at a difficult time of the year because I missed all my final examinations. But I was right, at least for the incident that I was suspended. And I could tell in my headmaster's look that he knew that I was right at that time, but he had to suspend me. I was lucky to latch up with him about 20 or 30 years later because, he was very young at the time and he's still around and he's still a very kind man. And we talked about this incident. And he's still a gentleman, so he wouldn't admit that the teacher was wrong. But we both agreed that something had changed between that experience of being suspended and the next year, when I became rugby captain, head boy of the school, and God knows what else. And part of that was probably the result of the fact that the father of one of my girlfriends at school, not my girlfriend, but a lady that was a friend, probably spoke about how terrible I was at home. And her father thought that I could be a coach of his son. So he called me up and I said, Alfredo, I would like you to coach my son, which I did. But I was surprised that anybody of the stature of this man that became a minister, an ambassador, or whatever, would be calling me to help his son. I mean, I had never been called to do anything positive in my life. So probably that trust that somebody put into my lap allowed or triggered that change that led me into become a force of nature of a better disposition, say, to speak. And, that changed my life. I continued being some sort of a young leader in my country, besides being a rugby captain and a head boy at school. When I entered the national system of education, I became a class representative. The class was small, 60, 90 people. But the next year I entered the university and we were 1,500 in that cohort. And again, I was elected to be a leader of that group. And I was surprised that, people 5 or 6 years older than me would come up to me for advice. And you say, and you have to give advice, right? And where do you draw that advice from? From your values, because you have no experience. But then the government, it was a difficult time throughout Latin America, and a coup d'etat arrived in Uruguay, and I joined a family that was migrating to Brazil, and then I entered this other environment, another language, another history, other literature. I couldn't understand a thing of what was going on. But that's my story from a broken family until I was about 21 years old. So.
Beautiful. And I would respect your grandma who could visualize the
Yeah.
bridge. And
Yes.
you rightly said that she gave me the direction, which was not known to you. It was unknown,
Yeah.
unheard. But the Cambridge word hitting your mind,
Yes.
thoughts become things. Thoughts
Yeah,
become
you're
things.
right. You're right. Very early on, I didn't even have a clue what Cambridge
You did
meant.
not have a clue.
No.
And it just came. So there was a thought which turned into a thing by some action. And I like another aspect of yours when you said that you were a rebellion, and then you took the role of a leader, and people were coming to you, and the number of people who were under you in terms of leadership kept on increasing. And finally, when you were at 1,500 people, people were asking for suggestions. People were asking for advice.
Hmm.
Wow. That means your leadership has been part of your DNA from the childhood itself.
Hmm. Could be.
Wow.
I think that there is an element, an inner drive that leads you forward, and some guidance helps. But I'm still figuring out, the difficulty of continuing to have a leadership style once you change the environment. I moved to Brazil, that stopped. Uh,
Okay,
well,
question is,
but coming back to Asha's comment, yes, family is very important, but there is an element of luck in where you're born, the country that you're born in, the family that you're born in, the school. So when people talk to me about meritocracy, I don't think much of that because it just depends where you start from. And that is very seldomly taken into account. And there are lots of people that probably deserve a better career than I've had in my life, but they didn't have the chance because they started from somewhere else, not as advantaged. So, meritocracy is okay when you have the same standing, the same departure point, but most of the people don't. Hmm? And that is something that we have to take into account.
absolutely, absolutely
Yeah.
right.